Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Whose return will be more important, Jordan Addison or TJ Hockenson? That and more on today's Minnesota football party.
I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, and if Harrison Phillips pointed at me, I would make a business decision too.
Hey, this is Arif Hassan with the Wide Lev Substack. I am currently in Ireland, where many extradition laws do not apply.
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcasts. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party. It's your guys hanging out talking next level Vikings football. So join in with Arif Hassan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota Football Party. And it starts now.
Welcome in. Happy Thursday. It's the Minnesota Football Party. We are live Mondays and Thursdays talking Minnesota Vikings football here on Locked On Sports Minnesota, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Get us to our next milestone. We're not that far off from 10,000 subscribers. Let's get a big boost here these next few weeks as people are riding high on the Minnesota Vikings. We're also available wherever you get your podcasts on the Locked On Vikings audio feed. Luke Braun producing great daily Vikings content over there. Joined today by Luke Braun, by Arif Hassan. Ron Johnson makes his Thursday appearance later in the show. But before that and around that interview, we will discuss Brian Flores' future. Is he coaching himself back into head coaching consideration? Looks like Jordan Love probably playing on Sunday. How do the Vikings defend him and prevent another Week 17 fiasco? And if Jordan Addison returns, that could be the first of two big returns for the Vikings. TJ Hockenson maybe on his heels. Which of those two returns will be bigger for the Vikings offense? Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app and use the code, go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Minnesota Vikings play the Green Bay Packers 72 hours from now. The winner has the lead in the NFC North. Let's first kick it to our Ireland correspondent, Arif Hassan. He's over there, by the way. You're already getting the lay of the land before the London game. You're scouting out the surrounding countries. You're spreading the word about this good Vikings team. You're going to bring the message to Giants Causeway later on in the week. It's going to be great. And for the record, in the notes, I got my weeks all messed up. I said, why were the Vikings so good against Jordan Love in Week 9 last year? It was actually Week 8. And why were they so bad in Week 16? It was actually Week 17. I messed that totally up. But
I noted that because I do read the notes.
You do religiously.
Yeah, so I did. Yeah, that was something.
He famously prepares for this podcast.
He does. But Jordan Love looked like a totally different quarterback from midseason last year to late season last year against this Brian Flores defense. Now, I will make note, these were some of the players getting snaps in that Week 17 game. Caleb Evans played the whole game. Patrick Jones played the whole game, and he hadn't, gotten his superpowers yet. Like now if Patrick Jones played a whole game, who knows what would happen? Mekhi Blackman, Andrew Booth, Lewis Seen, Anthony Barr. Like there were some dudes in that game that probably were a little overmatched at that point. But what was the difference last year? Why was Jordan Love so much better against this Vikings defense, and how can they prevent that from happening?
Well, he was figured out by then.
He was bad at the beginning and good at the end. That's the short version. No. So one thing that people who follow the Packers have noted is that the Jordan Love offense changed really substantially over the course of the season, significantly so about around the halfway mark. And this is kind of one of the marks in favor of Matt LaFleur being considered a high-quality coach, which, given the evidence of the last 2 weeks, pretty good argument, I think. But it is that he had adapted his offense pretty well. So if you look at the first couple of weeks, it evidently looks a lot like, what the Aaron Rodgers offense would look like. A lot of slant flats, not a ton of motion, kind of hoping for the route combinations by themselves to, provide opportunities for receivers to get open. A lot of Toyota thought with Sandy run.
Is he a Toyota
Yeah.
merchant?
Yeah, so James Kunow, something I believe this is a meme in the Luke Braun Discord, but James Kunow in the comments said,
it's not from it's everywhere. It's
okay, great. Said Jordan Love was at the peak of his Toyota-thon insanity run. That's why. I mean, I do have a take about Jordan Love not having a sustainable run, but this is the argument that it's changed, which is the Aaron Rodgers type offense was the one that was installed. Having the ability to have high chemistry with the receivers so that your back shoulder throws work on fades is not really a way to get your guy good if that's not something that he can do or if he's not comfortable with it. And so the offense became a lot more vertical. It introduced a lot more motion type concepts. It didn't rely on receivers being available as a means of providing pass protection, but rather adding additional blockers, stuff like that. And so that helped open up the offense a little bit. I think variance plays a role. I think that Jordan Love, took a bunch of chances both before and after the midway point, and the chances that he took after happened to work out. The tight window throws that he loves so much. So that's part of it too. As for how Brian Flores is going to resolve this problem, I think that the last couple of weeks of us attempting to divine what the Brian Flores defense will do against a specific opponent have been really poor. Our predictions have not been very good. But were I to guess, it would be more of this really fun cover 4 stuff that's been happening.
Yeah, they're going to be so the Packers are going to break out like every quarters beater they have. I'm going to guess.
Yeah, which
like
probably
put on tape.
Yeah, and a lot of cover 4 beaters, especially if they're matches, go to the flat routes that actually Aaron Rodgers loves so much, dragon concepts. And those will go outside, and the Vikings version of the cover 4 specifically leaves those flats wide open. There's reasons for that. Obviously, it's working, so it's not really a criticism of it. That's just a feature of the way what happens when you rush 5 instead of 4 and then have 4 up top. If that happens, they'll probably do a lot of palms type coverage, which means that they'll have that outside corner instead of carrying the guy vertical, trap an outside receiver so that he
can drive on the flat.
Yeah. So we might say, and that's like a very specific nitpick type thing, but that is, they'll probably adapt to what they think are the most common responses to what their coverage is. And that is something that's embedded within the Packers offense. So I expect to see it, which means I expect to see the counterpunch of having that outside corner drive to the flats if there are outside routes and stuff like that. Still going to be a lot of blitzes. We'll see what Love does with that. My understanding is that he's not a remarkable hot route reader or anything like that, but is still better than somebody like a Jalen Hurts. So we'll see.
Yeah, I go into each of these games now because Flores is our DC, and I try to figure out, all right, blitz game, not a blitz game, blitz game, not a blitz game. And this feels, again, kind of not like a blitz game. If you look at the 1 year of Love as a full-time starter, great against pressure and threw the most deep balls in the NFL. That's the sneaky one. 81 deep attempts last year and had a decent amount of success doing it. So when he faces pressure, he's good and can also connect deep. That feels like a non-blitz game to me. But he's hobbled. He's got a knee thing. Mm-hmm. That would encourage the blitz. Luke Braun, defending Jordan Love, where do you stand?
That's the other thing. So I asked Peter Bukowski on the crossover whether or not Jordan Love was going to play. They're not sure.
Peter Bukowski. Yeah.
Yeah.
The overriding sentiment is he will, but we really don't have anything to prove that.
Well, that was kind of how Peter put it, was like the expectation is that he will play, but it is not a certainty. You have to see how the week goes. He practiced on Wednesday. That's big. But he probably is going to be braced up and definitely not as mobile. So I could see them trying to bring some pressures or just trying to isolate whatever their favorite matchup is on that O-line, but that O-line has been pretty good at just winning its pass blocks, not giving up a ton of pressure on that. If there has been pressure, it's either coming like unblocked or via skill players or whatever. So finding and hunting out that matchup is probably going to be one of the more important like chess games here. But also, Brian Flores wants exactly the situation Arif described. You want to be in that palms coverage, quarters, corners playing a little bit shallower, a little bit more aggressive. Blitz comes in, forces the quarterback into a hot read, throw underneath. That's what we want. We'll have two underneath defenders over the middle, taking the slants or just, kind of squeezing checkdowns. And then you'll have those corners ready to drive on the flat if we just have to swing this thing out to the running back. That is exactly how Brian Flores wants you to live. So what the Packers will have to do is find a way to block those up. And if they want to get their quarters beaters, their double posts or whatever, but if they want to get those, they have to block for those. I don't think they can live on this one just getting to the flat. I think they've kind of addressed that.
I'm concerned that if two podcasters can predict that there's going to be a likelihood of palms coverage or something like that, then maybe we won't see any of it.
Yeah, very true. I mean, it's all they've put on tape. And Flores is definitely aware of that, but it just feels like it's their staple. It's just where they want to live this year.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
They're going to run a lot of duo, too. Everybody knows that, but it's that's just what their offense is. We knew Gary Kubiak would call rollouts. He still called rollouts.
I mean, would you say if it's a Jordan Love game, you've got one game of Jordan Love. Toss the other two out the window, right? I mean, the Malik Willis game plan was just so radically different. Obviously, from a run-pass balance standpoint, which left how many passes even on tape? 20 over 2 games?
Right.
So there's so little to go off of. The one game
it's
you
scouting
have
Dobbs sanity. What do you do?
You've got a slippery field in Brazil. That's the only game you have this year of Jordan Love. I think the greatest fear
they really should have brought their cleats, huh? Yeah.
They told them they were like, dude, bring your cleats, and the players were like, no.
The irony, though, is that this is an outdoor NFC North game, so inevitably by the second quarter, even though this is warm weather September, there will be a sideline report from whoever. Kevin, sounds like the Vikings are changing their cleats over here. They weren't accustomed to the turf today. They're going to go to the 3/8 cleats, and that will become a story on Sunday when somebody slips.
Yeah, very exciting.
The fear, I think, is that Matt LaFleur figured out Brian Flores' defense last year, and not that Jordan Love just got a lot better. The fear would be that LaFleur knows exactly what to do against this group.
I'm not concerned about that specifically based on the evidence that you provided. I would be concerned that because Matt LaFleur is a good coach just generally. Mm-hmm. So that possibility certainly exists, right?
One good game and one bad game against the Flores defense. That doesn't really... Right. Just because the bad game happened second and is the most recent in our memory.
Everyone figured out that Flores defense, and that has not translated into anything meaningful this year because it is different. So Luke and I think of both have cited Match Quarters. It's a wonderful Substack, by the way. But he put out a video about the Flores Rush 5 system. And one phrase that stuck out to me in that video is, now Flores is running a real defense. It is very similar to what he did last year in a lot of respects, but it wasn't a full defense. It didn't have answers to every problem, right? They had one tool. It was a hammer. Every offense was nails, right? That's what it was, right?
It was now very collegey in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so now it's a full toolbox because, remember, he didn't install the offense in the offseason. He installed the offense between week 3 and defense, sorry. He installed the defense between week 3 and week 4, right? Now you've had a full offseason to install this defense, as well as a full offseason to conceptualize this defense in a more complete way that allows you to have all of these potential answers and stuff like that. So I don't consider the Flores defense solved anymore because a bunch of offensive coordinators solved it in the final 4 weeks of the season last year, and nothing has come of it in the first couple of weeks of this year. So I think it's a different defense.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize, too, what those last 4 teams did. The Giants in week 1 did that same game plan. They tried to manufacture stuff to the flats all day long, and it fell totally flat. They thought that they were just going to walk in and see the same thing, and what else are they going to do, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that was their game plan, and it fell really, really flat, and it really they didn't push the ball downfield at all, because they kind of thought that there'd be too much pressure and too much blitzing and stuff, and then it turned out the answer was just die.
Let me ask a Brian Flores question. Ron Johnson coming up shortly. Last year, we had this same discussion as Brian Flores coached himself into a head coaching position. Then the last 4 games happened. I don't know if it was that or if it's the fact that he has litigation, but there were no interviews. There ended up not being any sweat about losing Brian Flores. And we're getting back to the fever pitch now where people are totally in on the idea of Brian Flores. But we're also on the heels of the Tua article, which I think probably smears his perception a little bit more. I also have this for you. Look at the NFL standings and just take stock. Take stock of if the season ended today, who would be on the hot seat? And I don't think there's going to be as many head coach openings. I don't. Zach Taylor and the Bengals, I guess, maybe. Kevin Stefanski, maybe if they think they have to fire the coach and keep Deshaun Watson around.
WP?
But other than Dable, other than Doug Peterson, I don't think. Try what?
That's 4.
Okay, but that's assuming they all get fired. They're not all going to get fired. I mean, some of them could pull out of this, and then we could have a couple surprises that fall off. But generally speaking,
some new ones will materialize.
If you look at the teams struggling the most, either they have a first-year coach who is more than likely safe, or like a young quarterback who's going to get a little more leash. I don't think there's going to be as many openings. And of those few openings,
I think Matt Eberflus is not safe.
Eberflus was. Actually
I don't think Canales is safe either.
Yeah,
he's got 1-year wonder written all over him.
That is, I mean, that would be par for the course for Carolina. There's no doubt about that. But okay, if it's 3, if it's 5, how many would seriously entertain a defensive-minded coach too? Because that's just not how the league operates. It would have to be a perfect fit. Flores is going to be picky. I think he wants the perfect fit as well. So I'm not convinced that this is the final year of Flores. Like, I think odds would be in favor of him being the DC here in 2025.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the primary thing is the litigation aspect of it. I think that an owner doesn't want to hire a head coach that might sue them, right? Like, I think it's just a classic anti-labor action, right? Like, it feels normal that wouldn't happen. So that's one.
Union King.
2, I don't think that this is a good behavior. I do not condone it. But if I were an owner, I would not interview Brian Flores, because this emerged from owners who interviewed Brian Flores and then he didn't get the job. Now, mind you, he found out he didn't get the job through really shady practices, right? Basically, Bill Belichick texted the wrong guy. And Brian Flores was like,
oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Forgot.
And so if you're going to be doing some Rooney Rule type interviews, if you're going to be bad faithing the whole process, which we know owners do, right? Brian Flores is not one of my 2 Rooney Rule candidates to interview. That's just not happening. Unless I'm like genuinely interested in. So, even if I'm genuinely interested, if I have a couple of candidates I like and he's only one of a few, I'm probably not interviewing him. So I think that's part of it too, right? It's a bad system. It's a broken system. I don't like it. But that's probably, a consideration. So that's 1 and 2 for the litigation aspect. 1, probably not favorable. 2, even if he was, there's some risk analysis and even just extending an interview to him. 3, defensive-minded head coach. You mentioned that. I think it is a little bit overblown. There was a cycle within the last couple of years where more defensive guys were hired than offensive guys. So it does happen. Yeah. But you're right that it is pretty rare, right? And then you mentioned the Tua thing. That's important. I think that he handled it like super well for what it's worth. But that's relevant. I think that he's going to be super picky, like you mentioned. Like who more than him knows how important it is to find the right owner fit, right? Like that's just something that he's harshly learned, right? So that's probably part of it. Yeah, and we're about to enter week 4, right? So who knows how the defense will do, but yeah,
long season ahead, but also. Like, I thought the same way you did last year, Sam, where I was like, man, he, clearly coached this team very well. And while schematically, things went up and down and he was experimenting with a new thing, it was, very clearly job coaching. And I thought that would be enough, plus, head coaching experience, to at least get an interview. Not even a call. Not even a call. Like, nothing. Total radio silence, which tells
Right.
me, okay, this is having a bigger impact than I thought. And I don't think anything about that situation will have changed by January.
Yeah, I tend to think you're right. Like I think that going from no interviews, no calls to getting hired, it's a pretty big step for somebody. And then you take into account the hurdles that Arif laid out. I think he's here next year, maybe beyond that. I think that there's a good chance that the Vikings, which is, it's sad because you're rooting for someone else's like misfortune almost, which you're not. Like no one wants that for Brian Flores to be like hamstrung in his ability to, rise up the coaching ladder. But it does play into the ability for the Vikings to have continuity there for a handful of years.
Well, the Vikings taking a chance is benefiting them. Like the Vikings kind of being like, okay, sure, you did all this, but you're ultimately a good coach. We want that, and so that's good. I wonder, and maybe this is copium, right? Maybe I'm just coping, but I wonder if he's not that interested in a head coach job. I have no idea. I mean, you probably wouldn't sue if you weren't, but I wonder how high priority it is for him. Sounded like it was kind of last year,
I thought it was last year.
I think he would have entertained it if the right team called, and then none of them called, and he was like, hey, what the hell, man? Really?
But I think he might be content. Again, I'm coping. I don't know. He might be content waiting it out a little bit,
And you might need a year to kind of shed the stink of this Tua thing and get more of these stories of guys like Josh Metellus and Harrison Phillips standing by him and everybody loving Flo so much here. And like
by the way, I think you
need this stuff to keep coming out to kind of wash over. This is the Febreze on the Tua stink.
Ron Johnson's going to come up here shortly on our show. We're also going to get into the bigger return, Jordan Addison or TJ Hockenson for the Minnesota Vikings. That's next on the Minnesota Football Party. We are brought to you today by Gametime. Use the Gametime app to get tickets fast. And on the Gametime app, you can use the Gametime Picks feature, which filters out the fluff and curates the best possible ticket options for you, whether that is sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and plenty more. You can get into Target Center for some WNBA conference finals or semifinals action as the Lynx take on the Connecticut Sun. You can get into Huntington Bank Stadium for the Gophers against USC a week from Saturday. You can get in cheaply, affordably, and easily with the Gametime app. Toggle on the all-in pricing. Get rid of those hidden fees. No one wants that. Gametime Picks obviously makes it very easy with the curation and the lowest price guarantee, where Gametime credits you 110% of the difference if you find better seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Gametime.
I never know if I'm supposed to respond when you do the call and response element.
I try to do as bad a job as possible.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like that.
I think that's more memorable that way. Yeah, I think people will remember the product more.
Well, now that you've mentioned that it's advantageous, I don't know.
Gametime.
There it is.
Ron Johnson coming up shortly. While we wait for Ron, let's talk about this impending Jordan Addison return. He was limited on Wednesday. That's a positive step. I think if he's full today, that's the signal. He's back. But definitely a good chance of his return. TJ Hockenson, the report is, doing really well. And his window opens for the London game. I still think that it could be post-bye, but I don't want to rule anything out. He could be back a week from Sunday. Which of these two players' returns will impact the Vikings offense more positively? I was going to make this into a 4-minute drill, but why don't we just have a long-form discussion about it? Luke Braun, go ahead.
Last year, I made a whole video about just how important TJ Hockenson is. Addison taking the top off the defense, taking pressure off of Jefferson, that does a lot. But TJ Hockenson, there are so many staple plays that run through Hockenson, whether it's Y choice, which is or Y delay choice, which is one of their favorite third down concepts, especially on third and long. A lot of run plays, like they basically reconfigured their run game last year once they had an offseason with Hockenson in the building to run strong side instead of weak. 2022 Vikings love to run weak side.
Huge change in the Shanahan system, by the way.
Yeah, like that changes so much of how you attack. It changes the personnel you use. Like the changes just sort of flutter off. And not to mention so many of their perimeter plays rely on him. Like he is the point of attack blocker on so many things, run and pass, not to mention the first read a lot of the time, the second read a lot of the time. If you're doubling Justin Jefferson, he's the guy going up the seam. And so he kind of has that same impact Addison has, but also does like a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah,
it's got to be Hockenson for me.
If you remember the Josh Oliver play from week 1, that is the Hockenson role, but like multiple times instead of just the 122-yard catch. Because, I mean, Jefferson wasn't even doubled. There were just eyes on him, right, from the middle linebacker or whatever the guy is, the guy in the middle of the field who was a linebacker. He's riding the seam a little bit, but he opens towards, Jefferson.
Bobby Okereke.
Okay, yeah. So some linebacker, Stanford guy, very smart, obviously, has eyes on Justin Jefferson, the number 3 receiver, and he opens up in that direction. Mm-hmm. His hips opening away from the tight end gave Darnold a great chance to slot that in. Now imagine that a number of times over the course of a single game as opposed to just the one time. The content creation instinct I have is for me to disagree with Luke and say it's Jordan Addison, but no, I think it's TJ Hockenson for the reasons that he lines out. But like one element that I mention this basically every time we have this discussion, but it is astounding to me. The average depth of target on Jefferson receptions before Hockenson arrives is like 10.1 yards downfield. After Hockenson arrives and when he's on the field, it's like 15. It's an insane. I've never seen a jump like that. Getting him 5 yards further downfield just for the introduction of one player is remarkable. And so you just make Justin Jefferson so much more valuable with the addition of somebody like Hockenson, who is a legitimate intermediate threat. And what's really interesting is that the Vikings are not using him the way that draft analysts would have predicted he'd be used. Are not using him the way that the Lions used him because they have Jefferson doing that stuff. And so you're just having Hockenson do a bunch of stuff, pulling defenders away underneath and creating space for Jefferson. I mean, you take a look at, and JT O'Sullivan has a really great breakdown of the Sam Darnold game this last week, and one or two of the things that he points out in this breakdown is how much of that offense is built around producing space for Jefferson. And we can say that a lot, right? Like, oh, it's designed around Jefferson. Seeing it diagrammed and outlined is really impactful. The ways that, they have Jefferson following space where they, run multiple crossers, for example, to pull a safety and a linebacker away, and then Jefferson enters that space later, and now Sam Darnold hits the second window for Jefferson. There's no one near him. Jefferson runs an insane C-shaped route, starting with a motion, and in order to do that, you got to have the tight end kind of clear out some stuff ahead of him, and it is just designed around finding opportunities to get Jefferson open. That's what the offense is. And Addison really helps with that a lot. Hockenson is almost vital to that. It's different levels of importance there.
You know that play? Remember that Jalen Naylor throw from the 49ers game, that like dagger throw, that back shoulder one? Yeah. That concept very rarely goes to Naylor. Like that's not really designed to go to Naylor. It was an opportunistic thing. Good job, Sam Darnold. But usually he's clearing out and then somebody else is clearing out. I think it was Oliver's also clearing out. So you got two clear outs and then somebody's running underneath it. And it's a 3rd and 7 catch and run. That was supposed to go to Brandon Powell. That play was designed, let's 3rd and 7, let's throw this one to Brandon Powell, was the coaching decision made.
Powell killed it, by the way. He
converted 2 other third downs on that drive, so great, right? That play, they almost always run it with Hockenson as the catch and run guy. Like that's how they view this guy, is as a guy that they can throw a catch and run to on 3rd and 7 as the tight end.
Yeah. And that would have been like, is that the play where people were hanging off his legs and he couldn't fully complete it, or are you talking about? There's a lot of plays that
the
look
back
like
shoulder.
That,
I forget if he was clean or not.
Oh no, you're right. No, that was a different play. No, yeah, okay. There was one where he
that was the touchdown, right?
No, this was the fourth quarter. In the 49ers game.
Basically won the game against the 49ers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was thinking of a different play where Brandon Powell was the one who receives it, and it's off. It's an incompletion. Sam Darnold is off on the throw, and that's because there's just some Houston Texan just laying on him. The fact that he got
Yes.
the throw off and all
From
was
last week.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can same very, very similar concepts involved in these plays, but Hockenson does a lot of the stuff that we're really excited about from some of these other receivers.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're unanimous in our assessment here.
Rip.
I like when we disagree more, but I also go with Hockenson, and I also point out, and I pointed this out before, Sam Darnold's best tight ends in his starting quarterback career are Ryan Griffin, Chris Herndon,
Yes.
and Ian Thomas.
Chris Herndon the fourth. You got to remember put the little I in the V.
Herndon, IV.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
He actually had the best tight end season of anybody that Sam Darnold has ever quarterbacked. So, and in addition, like the Vikings just don't have pass catching tight ends right now. They've got Jalen Naylor. Like
Sam Darnold was not there for the Tyler Conklin era Jets, right? Conklin showed up later.
He was not there for the Tyler Conklin era Jets.
Technically quarterbacked George Kittle once.
He did one time. Did George Kittle play in that game?
Actually, I don't know.
I don't know if he did. So it would have been whoever their backup tight end was. I can't remember. Sauber? I can't remember his name.
Eric Sauber, yeah.
Yeah. So TJ Hockenson, maybe. Do we think it's next week, or do we think it's post-bye? I would lean post-bye. And then I would assume ramp up at practice next week in London, but will not play. That's where my money's at. What do you guys think?
The logistics of London make this so difficult. I think that generally speaking, they'd bring him back as quickly as possible, kind of regardless of when the bye is. The London stuff kind of complicates it. I think that they just want to be as, have that engine running as quickly as they can. So I'm gonna disagree just because it's fun, and I don't have a reason to agree, I guess. With more evidence, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say he's going to play in London.
Play him with a pitch count.
Big game. Maybe a pitch count. I don't know. A lot of times when these players come back, there's no pitch count. Not always. Obviously, we've seen pitch counts before, but might just because it sounded like they were considering not even putting him on IR, given how quickly ahead of schedule he was on his recovery, right? Like it sounded like that. Like he might just be, yeah. But it sounded like there was like a hot second where they were considering not doing any of that. And so I think that he's just going to be 100% as soon as he comes off of IR.
Quick recovery.
I think you do the bye. Going international is just like this extra logistical challenge for all this stuff. I don't know. Do they have a home game after the bye? Because maybe reintroducing him.
They do not, because the Jets game is home, technically.
Is home. And then bye, and then what's after?
Lions, and then Rams.
Okay.
Should probably double-check the facts here. I think it might be road when they come back, but let's see. No, it's home. It's home. Lions home. Rams road.
So I wonder if
I was like 17 is like Lions away, right? Like that's
week
that's
17
really
Ford Field.
Okay.
Would that be? Is that going to be for the division? What the heck? What happened?
I don't know what's going on, man.
After the bye, home game. Reintroducing him in a comfortable environment rather than doing that on the road might be a consideration. But I also, I don't know, man. Like, all we ever have to go on is what Kevin O'Connell says about how these injuries are, and also he, is overly optimistic about it a whole bunch. So, who knows, man?
Right.
We have no idea. We're just podcasters.
Week 4 picks next, and we'll update you on the standings here in the Minnesota Football Party. Brought to you today by FanDuel Sportsbook. We're about to give you the lines and the props at FanDuel. And if you're a new customer, you want to get involved in America's #1 sportsbook, you've got a hunch about this weekend's games, deposit just $5. And with your first $5 bet, you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And then you can spread that around however you want. You can put it on the props, the futures, MLB playoffs, WNBA playoffs, college football. This is the best sports time of the year. No reason not to get involved at FanDuel.com. Download the app. Check out the website, FanDuel.com. Vikings, underdogs at Lambeau. Hammer the 2.5 this weekend at America's #1 sportsbook. Here we go. Week 4 picks. Remember, $1,000 mythical dollars in bankroll. We have escalating minimums and maximums every week. This week it's minimum 40, maximum 400. The standings are as follows. I am leading with 1,167 and change. Luke Inman, who is absent, is behind me by $12. Arif Hassan down by 100 and change. He's at 1,041. Luke Braun, 1-5 this year with his picks, but he did get on the board last week. He got one on the Packers, by the way. he still lost money last week. He is at $886. He's down by about 300, but that's okay.
886. Jesus.
Long season.
Wait, that's not. Down in the standing. Yeah.
You're down
long
by
season,
about
long
300.
Season.
It is a long season.
A lot of ball game left.
Yep.
So Luke Inman did half of his job. He's absent today. He sent me his prop, but he did not send me his spread. So he gets last pick.
That's the weirdest possible way to handle this.
How did he manage to? Whatever, man. That's classic Luke.
He must feel very strongly about
the prop.
Aaron Jones, a controversial one. Aaron Jones, anytime touchdown.
Oh dang! You took my prop.
That
took everybody's prop.
Anybody have that up immediately to see the odds there? I'm guessing it's about.
Oh, I wrote it down. I had it because I did have it. Plus 115.
Plus 115.
Yeah, still plus 115.
Still plus 115. Okay, so he puts 50 on that. Aaron Jones, anytime TD at Lambeau. He says he's going to do the leap. And then we go to the second pick, Arif Hassan, then me, then Braun.
Yeah. So obviously, we're learning that the player props are a scarcer market, so I'm going to go with that. Justin Jefferson over 79.5 yards at minus 114. As you know, it is the minimum bet.
Per usual. Sam Darnold has not thrown more than 28 pass attempts this year. I know the Vikings have been playing from in front, but even against San Francisco, when he had to throw to the end, only had 26 pass attempts. Green Bay's been susceptible against the run. I think that the Vikings will lean a bit more on the run in this game. I think that Darnold under 30.5 pass attempts feels like a winner to me.
Yeah.
Darnold under 30.5 attempts. I will put 75 on that. And the odds are minus 106. Luke Braun, you get 2 picks.
I got to make a decision about my prop, but I know what I'm going to do for my spread. I'm going to take. Here's the deal. I don't think the Texans are broken. I think they had a weird day. I think they're still a very good team. They're favored by less than a touchdown against the Jaguars, so I'm going to take them minus 6.5 against the ailing and actually broken Jaguars.
Touchdown's so tough, man.
Odds and amount?
That's minus 6.5. I will do the minimum on that. I think it's minus 114, but let me double check. And then I'm either deciding about attempts or yards with Aaron Jones.
Attempts are like what?
Oh no, it's minus 102 for the Houston Texans.
Okay.
And we'll minimum 40 that.
Yep.
And then for Aaron Jones, I just kind of think that these Packers, they've had a good run defense, and I think that they're not as good as the stats have been. And I think that Aaron Jones is just going to get undervalued. But I also feel as though running back receiving props, they don't have it on FanDuel. All right.
Rip.
So what are you doing?
Aaron Jones over 58.5 minus 114. We'll put the minimum on that too.
58.5? Okay, yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay, we got some Aaron Jones action. So I'm next. This will be a spread for me. I'm torn between a couple of them. And the one that I'm not going to go with is Steelers minus 1.5. I just can't. I can't buy in to Justin Fields forever.
Right, not until Russell Wilson starts, right? I get it.
If Russ was starting, the line would probably be 9.5 then. But I think I'd rather take just the better overall team in the Lions against a team in the Seahawks that's on the road and hasn't played anybody yet. So I'm going to take the lot. We're going to bring this down to Monday night. Lions -3.5 against the Seahawks. Put another 75 on that, and I'll look up the odds. But go ahead. Go ahead, Arif.
It's -115. I got you.
Thank you.
Cool. Man, so I'm looking at all these lines, and I love the underdogs this week. I was kind of worried because last week I loved all the favorites, and I'm like, man, I'm such a sucker, right? Betting on favorites all the time. That's a classic sucker move. No, now I love dogs, so I'm a sharp better.
Underdogs did go like 14-2 last week. Against the spread.
But yeah, I mean, this one's tough. Like, you've got, these awful Titans team against a Miami team that doesn't have a quarterback. That's +1.5. You've got a Rams team that just had this wonderful comeback against the 49ers. They're +3 somehow against Chicago.
That's weird.
Yeah.
That's weird.
All of these are tough. I wouldn't be discussing these except, you've already...
Caleb Williams' hype train is so powerful.
Yeah. Cowboys are only -5.5 against the Giants. I know that the Cowboys have been in trouble, but, come on. Vikings 2.5, +2.5 against Green Bay. Like, that's also tantalizing. Commanders +3.5 against Arizona, kind of tantalizing. Anyway, I think the Titans are so unpredictable. I think I need to go with the Rams +3, -115 versus the Bears. I'm almost tempted to put more than the minimum on this one. I feel very good about it, but
$41.
Ooh, yeah. Let's be a little spicy. Let's do $41.
You goaded him.
Yeah, I'm ruined.
He's gonna lose.
I'll never financially recover from
that. He's gonna lose an extra $1 when Caleb Williams goes off.
I'm in a group chat with Luke where I am just like an insane gambling addict, right? Like I won't stop.
Well, not gambling.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Games of skill.
I'm an insane pick-em.
Games of skill.
Yeah, I love fantasy, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, fantasy football enthusiast.
A completely different part of the brain than gambling, for sure.
Yep. Totally different.
Yeah.
Those are the picks. They're locked in. Luke Inman, I guess, can have his pick of the litter on the spreads. Just can't do Rams, Lions, or Texans. We got about 10 minutes here. We got 100 people watching live. Send us some questions. This is a good
Q&A.
time. Yeah, a little Q&A. Bad dad joke. Russell Wilson, over under 1.5 starts.
Well, Sam, this one seems up your alley. What's your take?
Russell Wilson's last fan.
My hope has not waned one iota. He will come in and he will right the ship. When Justin Fields
right the ship, they're 3-0, Sam.
No, but inevitably, Justin Fields will screw this up. They're going to be 4-4 at some point. The defense will be number one in the NFL. They'll be saying, "How are we 4-4? Our defense is this good," because they only score 7 points a game. So Russell Wilson comes in, saves the day, and then I end up looking really, really smart. Over. Bad dad joke, obviously. Over.
I'm also going to take the over on that, but mostly because I think Justin Fields is probably going to get hurt at some point. Less to do with, a heroic savior effect.
I'm going to take the under. I think we're Case Keenum here in Pittsburgh. We're 3-0. We're riding the hot hand. They're just going to stick with him.
Yeah, hot defense, crazy quarterbacking. We also have a question from James Kunow about expecting more explosive Justin Jefferson games when Hockenson comes back. Could we see more explosive JJ games when TJ returns? I mean,
Sometimes.
And as James points out in a later comment, it's not like Jefferson has been lagging behind or anything like that. But I do think that we'll probably see that. It's just tough because Jefferson, I don't know if his hand had an impact on whether or not he played effectively in the third or fourth quarter of the Texans game. Obviously, he dropped a pass, and then another pass you could count as a drop was out of reach a little bit. But the fact that, and then the week before he was out essentially for a quarter of a game or more. The fact that he produced 133 yards in that game and 80 whatever yards in this last game without having production in the second half of either of these games is crazy. This guy is unreal. So we'll probably just see more productive Justin Jefferson games as a matter of course. But having Hockenson back will help. But yeah.
Sometimes it turns into a productive, like an explosive TJ game because Jefferson ends up being the one opening things up for TJ Hockenson, and then he'll get 120 yards.
Yeah, basically the one game where he had his biggest game, and they kind of needed him late and didn't have him. I mean that would have been the one it could have been like a 175 kind of game.
That could have been a 200 game. That could have been a 200 game. Yeah.
Didn't need him in the second half against New York or Houston, but man, he feasted on Houston in that first half. Third downs, just all day long. Where's another good question? Yeah, which play caller on the schedule has the most realistic chance to crack the Flores defense? Well, it wasn't Shanny. Now we got LaFleur.
I don't
Ben
think it's a
Johnson.
Shanahan style defense.
I don't think it's a Shanahan style. Ben Johnson, technically not a Shanahan guy. Just
not a
runs
Shanahan
runs a lot of plays that Shanahan guys like, but not a Shanahan guy. Plus, they just play a different kind of football than in Detroit than they do with Shanahan. So I'm going to go with Ben Johnson.
I could see a super weird one.
Week 7.
McVay is tough, but that's the defense is built to beat that style. But I guess then it would have to be somebody of that style who cracks it. But what about, you know how sometimes it's like it's a game the Vikings win, but like they put the right concept on tape and then somebody else steals that? What about Dave Canales? The Titans, Bobby Callahan, the other offensive coordinator.
Oh,
what about? Yeah, no. What about Bobby Callahan? Just putting that right thing on there. Will Levis turns it over 3 times. Vikings win comfortably. But there's a couple of like explosive third downs, and then division opponents start watching that. You got two against the Bears, one against the Packers, one against the Lions. After that, they all watch that tape, and then they figure it out.
Good answer.
Yeah, I don't think Shane Waldron's going to do anything. So
he might not be employed by then. It might be somebody else.
Good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Like Levis will miss all the throws, but they will have been open enough to pique opposing coaches' interests on.
He'll sail one over to Cam Bynum, and then everybody watches that rep and goes, wait.
Yeah, so it'll be Callahan who solves it.
Yeah, who figures it out, but they can't execute it because they're the Titans.
Yeah.
Calvin Ridley's like, man, I'm open. I'm open every play.
Calvin Ridley's dad starts posting clips on Twitter. And now a common feature, I think, of wide receiver behaviors, having your dad post clips of you being open. Good move. Love social media. Keep doing it.
Somebody claiming to be Jerry Tillery's dad jumped into my YouTube comments yesterday. So we're watching that with great interest.
Positive things, or?
I didn't say anything about Jerry Tillery.
You'd think so.
But
okay.
We lost your video, Arif. Irish internet just went off. Zumi's wondering, what did you have an explosive or non-explosive crossover?
No,
with
Peter and I have had one explosive crossover, and it's the famous one from 2022. And the rest of them have been fairly normal.
Yeah,
so
I think
I don't know if that was the most tame, but he also thinks the Vikings are pretty good. Like he believes in them this year, so there's not a lot to fight about.
He was just so spot on. He was so spot on in 22, and he ended up it worked out exactly as he predicted. They lost to the Giants, and at that point, I think that neutralized some of the It
sucks because he was like statistically like doing a pretty bad analysis. Like he was not correct about it, but you picked one game. Like
right, yeah.
You were wrong about the nature of 13 games and right about one, but I guess that's how it goes. Nobody proves me wrong 14 times in a row, I guess.
I usually ignore Bukowski on Twitter. We love Bukowski, by the way. He was standing though for Greg Joseph like a week before the season, and I was like, dude, he was he was objectively not a good kicker in Minnesota.
Not a good kicker.
And he got cut. Shockingly.
Yeah, the Packers thought so. The Packers thought both of their kickers were bad. So they went with this Narveson guy.
Their kicker is...
They got a kicker wearing 44 now. It's awful.
Jesus Christ. Can he at least tackle?
Terrible.
Is that John Kuhn?
I don't know.
Is this back to my theory on the FanDuel bet, and then we'll get out of here soon. I kind of see this as a little bit more run forward of an offensive game plan for the Vikings, but the numbers in neutral situations would indicate that the Vikings are a pretty pass-centric offense this year. So do you see this as a passing game or a running game?
Everything's a passing game, Sam. Yeah, no, I mean the problem is that like I do think that the way that Jeff Hafley has organized that Packers defense has finally allowed that pass defense to be as good as the talent on their roster. We're all now becoming familiar with like how great Xavier McKinney has been, and how good he will probably continue to be for the Packers. So I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to get away from that, right? But I mean, Kevin O'Connell's a quarterback. It's just...
I'm looking directly at Quay Walker and seeing him as the weakest part of the Packers defense, and I just kind of want to run at him a million times. That's the Nate. That's why I went for an Aaron Jones one, because I just feel like this is a game. That is the best way to exploit the Packers defense, but that's why the Aaron Jones attempts line is at like 12.5 or 13.5. Like that's not a lot of carries.
I think that you're both correct that we will see more running than we typically do. I just think that at the end of the day, it's going to be about throwing the ball. Like, less than usual, but still about it.
James wondering if the Vikings would want to receive the kickoff. I think they're...
Yeah, whatever. I don't really care.
I think the double dip is pretty appealing. Like, it feels appealing.
It's not that important.
Well, that would be in favor of not receiving, of like kicking off, and then.
Sam, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying I aggressively don't care about electing to receive. I think that people care too much about electing to receive or electing to defer or whatever it is, because I think that the math on that is broken and stupid, and the fact that Belichick always did it just induced a bunch of people into thinking it was smart to try and manipulate towards the double dip. It's always good to have the last possession of the first half. That's just a good thing, regardless of if there's a double dip.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. James Kuhnau just asked, is it statistically negligible? All of the research I've seen on what to choose when you get the kick, or when you get the coin, is that it is negligible, which is good. I would hate for a coin flip to have that big of an impact, which is the problem with overtimes. It's not that huge. I used to care a little bit more about it because I think that the game script stuff is appealing. Back when the Vikings were a very run-forward offense with Adrian Peterson, I wanted them to receive the kick more often so they could establish a lead early on and run the ball more often. But honestly, it's really just relatively small, just in terms of the impact that it really has.
I think if you have like a super high flying offense, there's definitely an argument to like want to go set the tone, but it's not like a statistical one. It's like a it's like a this is the kind of team we are. It's like an identity argument.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see, I don't know if I can stat head this, but the winning percentage when you do score like within the final minute of the first half and then on the opening drive of the second half.
I mean, that's going to be tough because any statistic that has you score twice as the filter is going to have you win at a really high rate regardless. Yeah.
Right. It's
but you
teams
only
that score. Yeah, like if you look at like teams that score in the last minute of the half that deferred or that didn't, and I think you're going to find that they basically are the same, and they probably both have a high winning percentage.
Yeah, you'd have to balance it against whichever team. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably the best way to control.
Yeah, but you only have that opportunity if you defer the opening kickoff. So, I don't know.
You only have the opportunity to double dip, but the ability to
it's a style choice. Do you want to jump out and try to get out to a 7-0 lead right away because your offense is insane? I think if your defense is insane, it's kind of the same thing the other way. It makes sense to defer because then you can give yourself that opportunity and trust your defense. But like it also exists the same way. If you have a really good offense, you have a better chance to double dip. If you have a really good defense, you have a better chance to prevent the double. So it's like, it all balances out. It's a mirror. Yeah.
Feels pretty good when on the second play of the game you intercept the opposing team's high-powered offense and then score a touchdown like they did last week.
That's super great way to do that. Don't look at where Kamu positioned himself in that zone coverage.
Yeah, I think if you can guarantee that you're going to get a turnover on the first defensive drive, I would defer, but it's a difficult thing to guarantee.
So you should always.
Like if you played the Vikings last year,
always defer when you're playing the Vikings.
Yeah,
because they will give it to you. I think we got to run. We will have a postcast after the Vikings-Packers game. Luke Inman will host. Ron Johnson joins. Luke Braun, myself. And then we'll be back on this show live Monday, reacting to it. Join us then in the chat. Watch us on demand. on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts on the Locked On Vikings audio feed. I'm Sam Ekstrom. That's Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. Arif Hassan, Wide Left Substack. Subscribe to that. Get his great journalism there. We will talk to you next time on the Minnesota Football Party.